My name is Evelyn Vance, and at 48 years old, I stood before a full-length mirror, a woman I barely recognized. She was draped in sapphire blue silk, a dress that flowed over my form not like a garment, but like liquid courage. It was a conscious choice, powerful, unyielding. A world away from the soft crimson dress my husband, Marcus, had suggested. He always preferred me in red, a color that made me look more like a delicate flower and less like the architect of his empire. Tonight was our 15th anniversary, and the only head I was interested in turning was his, though not in the way he expected. "You look absolutely breathtaking, Mrs. Vance," Clara, our housekeeper of a decade, murmured from the bedroom doorway. I met her warm gaze in the mirror, offering a small, appreciative smile. "Thank you, Clara," I said, my fingers securing the diamond studs to my earlobes. My neck, however, remained deliberately bare. It was a statement. The only piece of jewelry on my mind was the Tiffany's diamond bracelet I knew Marcus had purchased 3 weeks ago, the one he'd so carelessly hidden in his office desk. I'd stumbled upon the box not while snooping, but while looking for a corporate tax file. That box wasn't a gift. It was evidence. Before this story unfolds, I want to express my gratitude to all of you for joining me on this path. If you find strength in these accounts of reclaiming power and meticulously planned justice, I invite you to subscribe. Your support is invaluable and allows us to bring more stories like this to light, celebrating those who refuse to be silenced. Now let's return to the evening where 15 years of quiet contributions culminated in one very loud statement. My hands had a faint tremor as I applied a final coat of dark lipstick. It wasn't anxiety. It was the hum of a cold, focused rage that had been simmering just beneath my skin for the last 6 months. I took a deep, steadying breath, reminding myself that tonight was a performance, one that demanded absolute and unwavering control. Control had become my most intimate confidant. I could pinpoint the exact moment it all began. It was a drizzly Tuesday afternoon in January, the rain drumming a somber rhythm against the panoramic windows of our downtown Boston office. My official title at Thorne Dynamics was Chief Strategy Officer, a role I'd carved out for myself, though Marcus often introduced me simply as his wife. He thought having a woman in a top C-suite role, especially his wife, might intimidate investors. I was reviewing the quarterly expense reports when a single-line item snagged my attention. A $15,000 charge from Tiffany Company. There was no client code, no gift notation, no business justification. The timing felt off. Christmas was long gone, my birthday wasn't for months, and our anniversary was still a half year away. When I brought it up over dinner that evening, feigning casual curiosity, Marcus's answer was too quick, too smooth. "It's a client appreciation gift, darling, for the Sterlings. You know how much Eleanor Sterling adores Tiffany's." I just nodded, my smile feeling like a cheap mask. The very next day, under the guise of wanting to buy something similar for a friend, I called Eleanor Sterling myself and inquired about the lovely new piece from Tiffany's she'd supposedly received. Her genuine confusion was the first nail in the coffin of my marriage. That night, while Marcus was in his steam shower, I sat at his desk and entered his password. It hadn't changed in over a decade. Evie, my love, 2009. The man could build a global tech firm from the ground up, but basic digital security was apparently beyond him. The confirmation I was dreading appeared in the form of a digital receipt, followed by an email thread that made my blood run cold. The recipient was my own executive assistant, Chloe Bennett. "She is going to be ecstatic," Chloe had typed, "almost as much as I adore what you got for me last month." Their exchanges were a sickening blend of office logistics and illicit promises. There she was, Chloe Bennett, 27, fiercely intelligent, ruthlessly ambitious. I had hired her myself just 2 years prior. I saw a younger version of myself in her drive, mentored her, shared my strategies with her over late-night takeout as we prepped for board meetings. All the while, she was sleeping with my husband in my home. A sharp car horn from the street below jolted me back to the present. Marcus would be downstairs, tapping his foot, checking his gold watch with theatrical impatience. I took one last long look at my reflection, picked up the small, elegant clutch that concealed a single black USB drive, and squared my shoulders. "Showtime," I whispered to the woman in the mirror. "Evelyn, the reservation is for 8. Marcus's voice boomed from the bottom of the grand staircase. "We can't be late tonight." The irony was so thick I could taste it. Marcus Thorne, a man perpetually late for every school play, family dinner, and holiday gathering, was suddenly obsessed with punctuality. But tonight, he believed, was a performance for his benefit. He had secured the exclusive founder's room at the Gilded Sparrow, Boston's most celebrated restaurant. It was a room that, unbeknownst to him, I had personally reconfigured with a single phone call. The intimate table for 2 was gone. In its place, I'd had the staff arrange a larger layout, with several other tables now occupying the space. Those tables were not for random patrons. They were for our business associates, our closest friends, and 2 hand-picked journalists from the city's leading financial paper. People whose perception of Marcus was his most valuable currency. The drive through the city was a blur of empty pleasantries. Marcus was unusually animated, almost giddy, lavishing me with compliments about my dress, my hair, my perfume. It was an enthusiasm that would have once made my heart flutter. Now I recognized it for what it was, a performance. The same disarming charm he deployed in boardrooms and for investor roadshows. "You really pulled out all the stops for this one," I commented, my gaze fixed on the glittering Boston skyline. "The Gilded Sparrow on a Friday? You must have called in a serious favor." "Only the best for my girl on our 15th, he said, his hand finding mine. I allowed him to take it, feeling his thumb trace circles over my bare wrist. "I have something extraordinary for you tonight, Evie. Something befitting the woman behind the man." That phrase, "behind the man," made my stomach clench, as if I hadn't been standing right beside him, and often in front of him, clearing the path. As if my degree in economics and my strategic acumen hadn't been the very lifeboat that kept Thorne Dynamics from sinking during the recession, while Marcus was busy schmoozing clients and complaining about the market. The restaurant was a symphony of gold light from crystal chandeliers and the soft flicker of candlelight. The maitre d' greeted us with a practiced warmth, leading us toward the reconfigured private room where several of our guests were already seated. I saw Marcus's brow furrow for a split second at the unexpected crowd, but he smoothed it over instantly, his public face snapping into place. Mr. Thorne, a pleasure, our usual server, Antoine, approached with a bottle of champagne, and the radiant Mrs. Vance. "A happy anniversary to you both." We touched glasses, and Marcus immediately launched into his favorite topic, the legend of Marcus Thorne. He spoke of how we met in college, how I was the only one who believed in his grand vision. It was a story he'd polished to a high sheen over the years, a carefully constructed narrative that cast him as the lone visionary and me as the quiet, supportive wife. He never mentioned that it was my family's inheritance that provided the seed money for the company, or that my father's connections secured our first 3 major contracts. I was nodding along, playing my part to perfection, when I felt the entire atmosphere in the room shift. Marcus's gaze drifted past my shoulder, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly. It was a micro-expression of pure panic, one he quickly masked with a veneer of nonchalance. I didn't have to turn around. I knew. Chloe had arrived. She glided toward our table in a little black dress that probably cost more than her first car. But my eyes weren't on the dress. They were locked on the glittering diamond tennis bracelet encircling her wrist. My bracelet. The very one I'd admired in a Tiffany's display case 6 months ago while out with Marcus. "Surprise, darling," she cooed, her eyes fixed on me, a smug smirk playing on her lips. She was expecting a scene. Tears. A hysterical outburst. Something that would paint me as the unstable, jealous wife in front of this influential audience. Instead, a profound and eerie sense of calm washed over me. The last chess piece had just moved into position. I'd half expected she might make an appearance. A hotel reservation under Marcus's name just a few blocks away was a fairly strong hint. But the bracelet, that was a gift I hadn't anticipated. "Chloe," I said, my voice perfectly level and cool. "What an unexpected surprise. I don't believe your name was on the reservation." Marcus immediately tried to intercede, his voice a full octave higher than usual. Chloe was just in the neighborhood, dropping off some urgent papers for Monday's presentation. "Right, Chloe?" I watched her own smile falter. This was not going according to her script. "That bracelet is exquisite," I continued, my voice carrying clearly across the now hushed room. "It's a Tiffany's piece, isn't it? Looks exactly like the one I pointed out last winter." Chloe's hand flew to her wrist in a reflexive, guilty gesture. Marcus's face had lost all its color. With a slow, deliberate movement, I reached into my clutch, retrieved the small black USB drive, and placed it firmly on the white linen tablecloth between us. "Our prenuptial agreement has a rather robust infidelity clause," I stated, my voice clear and projecting, ensuring every single person in the room could hear me. "And my private investigator has found ample proof, not just of this affair, but of the 3 that came before it. And even more fascinating, he uncovered some creative accounting buried deep within the company's financials." I pivoted slightly to address the room. Would anyone be interested in hearing about Thorn Dynamics' shadow accounts before the SEC gets the full report? Marcus's face went from pale to a ghastly shade of gray as the waiters paused mid-service, becoming silent witnesses to the public execution of his marriage, his reputation, and quite possibly his entire career. The silence that blanketed the room was absolute, so heavy you could feel it pressing down. I watched Marcus's face, usually a mask of easy confidence, crumble under the weight of my words. 15 years of our life together flickered through my mind, not the happy memories, but the slow, corrosive decay of our partnership. "Evelyn, please," he finally choked out, his hand reaching for mine across the table. "We can talk about this in private." I pulled my hand back. My thoughts drifted to a different time, to Boston University in 2008. I was 23, a top economics graduate with job offers from Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. Marcus was the charismatic business major with a grand vision for a tech startup, but grades that were decidedly average. Yet, when he talked about his ideas, his passion was a force of nature. When he proposed that summer, I set aside my Wall Street ambitions, convinced that building something with him was a greater calling. "You're the engine, Evie," he used to say, as we hunched over business plans on a card table in our tiny apartment. "I'm just the handsome salesman who gets us in the door." Back then, it was our inside joke. Over the years, it had become his reality. "There's nothing left to discuss," I said, my voice as cold as the ice in his water glass. I watched as Chloe, the picture of arrogance just moments before, seemed to shrink into a nearby chair, her bravado evaporating. "The time for private discussions was before you gifted my anniversary present to my own mentee." The irony was bitter. Chloe was a mirror of my younger self. Ambitious, brilliant with data, hungry to make her mark. I had seen that fire in her and nurtured it. I never imagined she was plotting to take my place, not just in my home, but in my life's work. "Thorn Dynamics was launched with my family's seed money," I continued, my voice steady and resolute, projecting to every corner of the room. My father's personal introductions secured our first 3 major clients. My financial models built the entire structure that saved us from ruin during the 2009 financial crisis. Across the room, I saw Thomas Reed, a senior writer for the Financial Times, scribbling furiously in his notepad. Perfect. Let the record be straight. Year after year, I had become the silent operational force of Thorn Dynamics, while Marcus was the public face, charming investors and gracing magazine covers. I was the one developing the predictive analytics that made us profitable, restructuring departments for maximum efficiency, and quietly building the data science division that was now responsible for over 60% of our revenue. Do you remember the acquisition of a rival firm, DataCore? I asked. My question directed at Marcus, but intended for everyone. The deal that catapulted us onto the national stage? Marcus's jaw was so tight I could see the muscle twitching. He knew exactly where this was headed. I was the one who spent 6 months doing a deep dive analysis of their vulnerabilities. I structured the entire offer. I wrote every word of the acquisition strategy. I let that hang in the air for a moment. But who was on the cover of Tech Visionary Monthly? Who flew to New York to accept the Innovator of the Year award? Evelyn, you always hated the spotlight. He tried, his voice laced with a desperate plea. No, I corrected him sharply. I was told the spotlight wasn't my place. I was told that clients felt more comfortable dealing with a male CEO, that investors needed a strong male leader at the helm. I turned my gaze to Chloe, whose face was now streaked with tears. Is that what he told you too? That you'd be the secret power behind the throne, making him look brilliant while you stayed in the shadows? Her heartbroken expression was all the confirmation I needed. A knot of nausea tightened in my stomach as I recalled the precise moment I understood the full scope of the betrayal. It was 3 months ago. I'd walked past his home office and heard him on the phone. Once Evelyn is out of the picture, we'll reorganize the executive team, he'd said, his voice casual. You've already proven you can handle her C-level responsibilities. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand clamped over my mouth to stifle a gasp. The board trusts my judgment, he'd continued. They'll buy whatever story we sell them. The very next day, I had my first meeting with Eleanor Croft, the most feared divorce attorney in Boston. You're in a far stronger position than you think, Evelyn, she'd told me after reviewing our prenup. There's an infidelity clause in here that Marcus has likely forgotten all about. His own father insisted on it, ironically, to protect the family from gold diggers. I had let out a bitter laugh at that. Marcus's father had always underestimated me. This clause, Eleanor explained, tapping the document, entitles you to 50% of all marital assets, plus an additional 10% of the company's total valuation for each proven instance of infidelity. With the right evidence, you could walk away with a controlling interest in Thorne Dynamics. That meeting was a baptism by fire. I transformed from a grieving wife into a cold, calculating opponent. I hired a private investigator, a meticulous former FBI agent named David Chen. He not only documented Marcus's trysts with Chloe, but also uncovered evidence of 3 prior long-term affairs. But what David found in the company's deep financials was far more damning. Hidden offshore accounts, a pattern of questionable fund transfers, client money being borrowed for personal investments and then quietly replaced just before quarterly reports. Antoine, the server, approached our table again, his face a mask of concern. Mrs. Vance, would you like me to escort Miss Bennett from the premises? Before I could respond, Chloe shot to her feet. This is insane. Marcus, tell her the truth. Tell her about us, about the plans for the company. Company plans? I arched an eyebrow. You mean the plan where I'm systematically pushed out? Or the one where my entire analytics framework is attributed to you in the next quarterly shareholder presentation? Her eyes widened in shock. I had gained access to Marcus's cloud storage weeks ago and found the draft presentations. They had already begun to erase me from my own story. The ultimate betrayal wasn't the sex, it was the theft of my legacy. Evelyn, Marcus's voice dropped to a desperate whisper. Think about what you're doing. This company is our legacy. No, I corrected him, standing up to address the silent, captive audience. Thorne Dynamics was built on my strategies, my capital, and my quiet agreement to be invisible. That arrangement ends tonight. I looked directly at Thomas Reed, the journalist. I have documented proof of systemic financial misconduct at Thorne Dynamics, personally orchestrated by CEO Marcus Thorne, and I am fully prepared to deliver this information to the proper regulatory authorities. Marcus's face was now completely devoid of color. He knew what I had. "You wouldn't dare," he hissed. "Those were temporary liquidity measures. Everything was put back." "Just like I was supposed to be put out?" I asked quietly, the weight of 2 decades of being dismissed settling on my shoulders. "You built your kingdom on a foundation of my work and your lies, Marcus. And tonight, the tide is coming in." A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the restaurant as my words settled in the charged atmosphere. For a long moment, nobody moved. I remained standing, my shoulders back, the USB drive a dark promise on the white tablecloth. "You've made your point, Evelyn," Marcus finally ground out, his voice low and seething with a rage that was beginning to eclipse his fear. "Now let's take this somewhere private." I just shook my head slowly. "Privacy is a privilege you lost a long time ago, Marcus. It's been your shield for far too long." Looking back, the drive to the restaurant had been a master class in his oblivious arrogance. He'd been so attentive, his hand resting on my knee as he navigated through downtown, pointing out a new skyscraper being built by one of our major clients. 15 years, he'd mused, a sound of genuine warmth in his tone. "Remember our very first anniversary? That tiny Italian place in the North End where we had to count our cash to make sure we could afford the tiramisu?" Of course, I remembered. We were a real team back then. I'd worn a dress I'd saved for months to buy, and he'd given me a simple silver locket with our initials. We had spent the night sketching out our future on a napkin, fueled by cheap red wine and shared ambition. "The best is yet to come, Evie," he'd said in the car just an hour ago, completely unaware of the cliff he was about to drive off. I had simply smiled, checked my lipstick in the mirror, and run through the opening lines of my speech one last time. The Gilded Sparrow had been the perfect stage, not just for its gilded reputation, but for the meticulous planning I'd undertaken. I had called the owner Jean-Pierre, a man I'd cultivated a friendship with over years of corporate events, 3 weeks prior. "Mrs. Vance, for your anniversary, we have the founder's room as Mr. Thorne requested. Very private, very intimate," he'd said. "Jean-Pierre, I was hoping for something a bit more inclusive," I had replied smoothly. "The large private room, perhaps, with a few other tables. But of course, your husband was very specific about wanting absolute privacy. It's my anniversary too," I'd said softly. "And I have a little surprise planned that really requires an audience." A sizable donation to his favorite culinary charity had sealed the deal. The guest list was just as calculated. Ben and Sarah Carter, our oldest friends, who I knew had suspected Marcus's infidelities for years. Walter Sterling, our largest single investor. Thomas Reed from the Financial Times. And Diane Holloway, a senior partner at Bain Capital, who had been trying to recruit me to her executive board for months. Now, as the gravity of his public ruin settled in, Marcus's expression shifted from pure shock to a desperate reptilian calculation. I knew that look. He was frantically searching for a countermove, the same look he got when a business deal was about to go south. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, forcing a hollow chuckle, "my sincerest apologies for this awkward scene. My wife is, understandably, emotional about a private disagreement. I'm afraid she's conflating some business matters with personal hurt." Chloe remained a statue of misery in her chair, the diamond bracelet on her wrist now glinting like a pair of handcuffs. "Is that why you had me preparing documentation for a potential SEC inquiry 2 weeks ago?" I asked, my voice ringing out. "As a personal matter?" His fabricated smile vanished. I'd casually suggested we get some documents in order, just in case the SEC ever had questions about some past transactions. He'd dismissed my concerns as overcautious, never once suspecting that I was the anonymous source who had already tipped off the agency. "Evelyn, you're making wild accusations without any context," Marcus blustered, his eyes darting nervously toward Walter Sterling, whose firm held a 20% stake in our company. "Perhaps we should discuss the context, then," I suggested, picking up the USB drive. I turned to the room. 3 years ago, Marcus authorized the temporary liquidation of client development funds to cover a personal loss on a real estate venture in the Cayman Islands. The money was replaced before the quarterly audit was finalized, but the digital fingerprints of the transactions were never fully erased. Walter Sterling's face grew dark. "Is this true, Thorne?" Before Marcus could formulate another lie, Chloe found her voice. "Evelyn, stop. This isn't about the company. This is about you being jealous of me." "Jealousy?" I laughed, a genuine short burst of amusement. "Oh, Chloe, did you really think you were the first? The files on this drive also document his affair with Amanda from the marketing department in 2019, with Lauren from our Denver office in 2021, and a very cozy weekend in Nantucket with that pharmaceutical sales rep whose name he probably never bothered to learn." I turned my full attention back to Marcus. "Did you happen to mention the infidelity clause in our prenup to Chloe? The one that costs you an additional 10% of the company's value for each affair I can prove?" Marcus's dumbfounded expression was all the answer I needed. He'd either forgotten or never truly read the fine print his own father had insisted on. The clause, designed to protect the Thorne family fortune, was about to transfer its control directly to me. "This is preposterous," Marcus sputtered, but his voice lacked all its usual conviction. "Those financial decisions were board-approved. The board was never informed," I corrected him calmly. "I've reviewed the minutes of every board meeting from the last 5 years. You acted unilaterally, assuming nobody would ever check the books because you kept your wife, the financial strategist, preoccupied with running the actual business." Ben Carter, our old friend and a member of the board, leaned forward. "Is that true, Marcus?" The entire restaurant was now a silent theater. Even the staff stood frozen, watching the drama unfold. Antoine, who had served us on countless anniversaries and celebrations, looked as if he'd just seen a ghost. Throughout it all, I maintained a composure that had been forged in the fire of 6 months of silent planning. I had rehearsed this in my mind 1,000 times, playing out every possible scenario, training my voice not to break, my hands not to shake. This calm was not my nature. It was a weapon I had painstakingly crafted. "This drive contains everything," I announced, placing it back on the table. "Copies of all relevant financial records, documented proof of the affairs, and evidence of corporate malfeasance. My lawyer has the original copies. She has instructions to deliver them to the SEC, the entire board of directors, and several media outlets at precisely 9 o'clock this evening, unless she receives a call from me to stand down." I checked my watch, a deliberate, theatrical gesture. "That gives you 45 minutes. What do you want, Evelyn?" Marcus finally asked, his voice a ragged whisper. "What I have earned," I replied, my voice unwavering. "A controlling interest in the company I built from the ground up, a public and legal acknowledgement of my contributions, and a divorce that accurately reflects the gross imbalance of our partnership." Chloe finally broke, sobbing quietly into a napkin, smearing her expensive makeup. "And Chloe," I added, unable to resist a final parting shot. He told Amanda from marketing she was the love of his life too, right before he replaced her with Lauren. The perfectly composed young woman who had glided into the restaurant an hour ago was now a crumpled mess. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of something akin to pity. She was just another casualty of Marcus's ego. "This is blackmail," Marcus seethed, his composure finally shattering. He reached for his water glass, but his hand trembled so violently he knocked it over. Water spread across the pristine white tablecloth like a creeping stain. "No, Marcus," I said, my voice soft but firm. "This is a reckoning." Walter Sterling, the investor, stood up and walked to our table, his face grim. "I want to see what's on that drive, Evelyn," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He ignored Marcus completely. "Walter, this is a private family matter," Marcus pleaded. "Not when it involves my firm's money, it isn't," Walter shot back. Not when I have a fiduciary duty to the clients who have invested millions in Thorne Dynamics based on your leadership." He turned to me. "The financial irregularities? How long?" "3 years that I can definitively prove," I answered. "The pattern of infidelity? The better part of our entire marriage." Diane Holloway from Bain Capital was next to approach, her expression a mix of professional gravity and personal empathy. "Evelyn, that senior partner position we talked about last month. The offer still stands." I gave her a grateful smile. I had met with Diane 3 weeks ago, framing it as a casual lunch to discuss market trends. In reality, I was building my parachute, ensuring I had a soft place to land no matter how tonight unfolded. "This is a coordinated ambush," Marcus yelled, his voice cracking. "All of you, you've been plotting this. You think you can force me out of my own company? Your company?" Thomas Reed, the journalist, looked up from his notes. "Wasn't Thorne Dynamics founded with Mrs. Vance's family inheritance? Isn't she listed as a co-founder on the original Articles of Incorporation? That was a detail I hadn't planted, but I could have kissed him for it. The false narrative was disintegrating faster than I could have hoped." "Save it, Marcus," Ben Carter interrupted, coming to stand beside me. His wife, Sarah, followed, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "We've known something was wrong for years. We saw you with that girl from marketing at the company holiday party in 2019. Sarah and I saw you and Chloe checking into the Four Seasons back in April. A genuine pang of hurt cut through my armor." "And you never told me?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. Sarah squeezed my shoulder. "We tried to drop hints, Evie, but you always seemed so determined to protect him. We figured you either knew and were handling it your own way, or you simply didn't want to know." "I didn't want to know," I admitted, the truth of it hitting me hard, until I had no other choice. That revelation, that my friends had seen the cracks long before I did, made the betrayal feel even more profound. All their gentle inquiries, their extra invitations for girls' nights, they were trying to build me a lifeboat all along. Marcus's face was now a blotchy red, his jaw clenched, his nostrils flared. His infamous temper, usually reserved for behind closed doors, was about to make a public debut. Chloe suddenly stood, the bracelet catching the light. "I have to go," she mumbled, looking at the floor. "Sit down," Marcus commanded, his mask of civility completely gone. "This isn't finished." "It is for me," she replied, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "You told me Evelyn was just a figurehead. You said she knew nothing about the actual business and would take a settlement and disappear quietly." The murmurs in the room grew louder. Marcus looked like a cornered animal. I calmly took out my phone and dialed a number I now knew by heart, putting the call on speaker. The entire restaurant fell silent. Eleanor Croft's office. The crisp voice of my attorney's paralegal filled the space. "This is Evelyn Vance," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Please proceed with the filings, as we discussed." "Right away, Mrs. Vance. The documents are ready. We'll be filing electronically with the court and the SEC within the next 10 minutes. The temporary restraining order on all major company assets should be in effect by morning." I ended the call and met Marcus's wild eyes. That's just the beginning. The divorce papers cite the infidelity clause. The corporate filing documents my intellectual property claims to the analytics framework, the client management system, and the acquisition model I created, all of which are currently attributed to you in official company materials. "You can't prove those were your ideas," he snarled. "Actually, I can," I said, a wave of pure liberation washing over me. I kept every notebook, every early draft, every single late-night email where you asked me to dumb down the complex models so you could present them as your own the next day. 15 years of documentation, Marcus. I turned to Walter Sterling. "The predictive analytics that increased our client retention by 40% last year, that was me. The acquisition model that allowed us to buy DataCore for a fraction of its market value, also me. the financial restructuring that saved this company in 2009, all me. Walter's eyebrows shot up. Is this accurate, Marcus? Marcus's stunned silence was his confession. Ben Carter shook his head in disgust. The board needs an emergency meeting. Tomorrow morning, Walter declared, his investor brain already calculating the fallout and the path forward. I stood, collecting my clutch and the USB drive. I believe my time is up. I've stated my position. I addressed the room. I'm not just fighting for my share of Thorn Dynamics. I am taking back what was always mine, the credit, the recognition, and the company I built. I turned to Marcus one last time, slowly twisting my wedding ring off my finger. I placed it on the table next to the spreading pool of water from his overturned glass. Happy anniversary. I walked out of the Gilded Sparrow with my head held high, feeling the weight of every stare on my back. The cool night air hit my face and it felt like the first breath of a new life. I hadn't expected to feel so light, as if I had shed a heavy, invisible cloak I'd been wearing for 15 years. Behind me, I could hear Marcus calling my name, his voice raw with desperation, but I didn't look back. My driver was waiting at the curb as instructed, the car door already open. Is everything all right, Mrs. Vance? He asked, his eyes full of professional concern. Everything is perfect, I replied, sliding into the plush leather seat. Take me to the Mandarin Oriental, please. I had booked the presidential suite 2 days ago. I knew I wouldn't be going home tonight. As the car pulled away, my phone started to vibrate uncontrollably. A glance at the screen showed a flood of calls and messages from board members, partners, and friends. Bad news travels fast in Boston, but meticulously planned, justice travels even faster. I silenced the phone and leaned my head back, letting the city lights wash over me. By morning, the Boston business world was on fire. Thomas Reed's article in the Financial Times was a masterpiece of measured devastation, detailing serious allegations of financial misconduct and intellectual property theft at Thorn Dynamics, leveled by the co-founder herself. My phone had nearly 100 notifications. I answered only 3. Walter Sterling, Diane Holloway, and my lawyer, Eleanor. The board is meeting at noon, Walter informed me, his voice all business. Marcus is trying to frame this as a hysterical wife's vendetta, but the financial documents you sent over are undeniable. Will you be there? I'll be there, I said, looking out at the Boston harbor from my suite. I wouldn't miss it. And Evelyn, he added, a note of respect in his voice. For what it's worth, I always suspected you were the real brains of the operation. The call with Eleanor confirmed the TRO was in place. Marcus was frozen out, legally barred from making any significant operational or financial moves. The divorce filing was official. The gears of justice were now turning on their own. I spent the rest of the morning on the phone, methodically calling our key clients, the people whose relationships I had personally cultivated over the years. They had all received a frantic damage control call from Marcus's office at dawn. Evelyn, Marcus is telling everyone you're having some sort of breakdown, said Charles Hemmings, our very first client. Charles, I replied calmly, you and I have worked together for over a decade. In all that time, have you ever known me to be irrational or unstable? There was a long pause. No, he admitted. You've always been the calmest one in the room. Then I suggest you consider why Marcus needs to paint that picture of me, instead of simply addressing the evidence, I said. By the time the board meeting began, I had secured the unwavering loyalty of our 4 largest clients, who accounted for nearly half of our annual revenue. The relationships I had built, often in the background, were now my front line of defense. The virtual board meeting was swift and brutal. Confronted with the mountain of evidence I had provided, the board voted unanimously to place Marcus on indefinite administrative leave, pending a full independent investigation. I was named interim CEO. When I finally went back to the penthouse that evening with a small moving crew to pack my personal belongings, Marcus was there, waiting. He looked like a ghost, his usually impeccable suit rumpled, his hair unkempt. "You've ruined everything," he said, his voice hoarse as I walked in. 15 years of our life. Our work. For what? Revenge. I set down my briefcase and looked around the vast, sterile space we had called home. It was a golden cage of my own design. "This isn't revenge, Marcus," I said. "This is a correction." "The board suspended me," he said, as if I didn't know. "From my own company." "Our company," I corrected him. "And yes, I know, I was on the call." He stared at me then, a flicker of genuine confusion in his eyes. "How long, Evie? How long were you planning this?" "The planning began the day I heard you on the phone with Chloe, discussing how you'd manage my exit," I told him. "But you laid the groundwork yourself years ago. Every time you took credit for my work, every time you dismissed my contributions, every time you decided you were entitled to a life outside our marriage, you were handing me another stone to build this wall." He sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands. "I never thought you'd do this. You were always so agreeable." "That was my mistake," I acknowledged, moving through the rooms and directing the movers to my art, my books, my personal effects. I let myself believe that the luxury and the success were a fair trade for being invisible. I thought professional satisfaction could fill the space where personal respect should have been. I paused by a framed photo from our wedding day, the two of us young and beaming, so full of genuine love and shared dreams. You know the truly sad part? I really did love you. Even after I suspected the affairs, I made excuses for you. It was only when I realized you were actively planning to erase me from our life's work that the blinders finally came off. "I never meant to hurt you," he mumbled, a lie so feeble it was insulting. "Yes, you did," I said, my voice soft but clear. "Maybe not at first, but over time, hurting me just became an acceptable cost of you getting whatever you wanted, and in some ways, that's so much worse." I finished my work, his eyes following me with a lost, bewildered look. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice small. "Now I rebuild," I said. "The company, my life, all of it." As I walked toward the door, he made one last pathetic attempt. "We could fix this, Evie. We could—" I turned back for a moment and saw the young man I fell in love with, but he was a phantom, trapped behind the face of this broken man who still couldn't grasp the magnitude of his own actions. Goodbye, Marcus. Walking out of that penthouse for the last time, I felt a complex mix of triumph and sorrow. It wasn't a clean victory. Real life rarely is. But as the elevator descended, I knew that the golden cage that had held me captive would now become his own gilded prison of legal battles and public shame. 2 days later, I sat in my new office, Marcus's old office, as the interim CEO of Thorne Dynamics. On my desk was a proposal for a complete corporate rebranding. The company would be renamed Vance Strategic, using my own name, a name synonymous with the integrity and vision that had been the company's true foundation all along. The new logo was a stylized phoenix, a symbol of rebirth from the ashes. As I signed the authorization papers, my hand steady and sure, I glanced at the pale, empty space on my ring finger. 15 years of my life had been dedicated to building a kingdom for a king who saw me as disposable. Now it was time to build an empire for the queen. The cage door was open. I was finally, irrevocably free. End of story.